Hey, what's up, guys? This is Benny Ricciardi with rotocurve.com, and I'm here with our DraftKings NBA picks for Monday, December 21st. There's a 9-game slate that we got on tap, a couple games with a little bit of a higher total. There's only one or two games that look like they may turn into blowouts, and everything else is kind of in play, all in that like 195 to 205 total kind of range. Starting at the top, as we always do with the studs, there are actually two games that I'm going to be targeting pretty heavily today, and that's where you're going to see a lot of my studs and kind of the top stack options that I give you guys really come from. The first stud that I'm going to be paying up for is going to be John Wall. His usage is really up since Bradley Beal got hurt. He's hitting his jump shot right now, which gives him another way to score. The fact that his points have been up has really what's helping his fantasy score. He's still getting you the rebounds. He's still getting you the assists. He's still picking up a couple steals and blocks as he always does. But the fact that his jump shot's been dropping has allowed him to really up his scoring, and that's really where you've seen the uptick in his fantasy value come from lately. Now, I do love this game for him. He's going up against Sacramento. Washington is one of the higher paced teams we have in the league. So is Sacramento. So you put the two of them together, and you should expect to see a lot of points in this game. I think you can stack up Wall with, like a Wall and Rondo on the other side. Maybe throw in a guy like Caspi, try to find some of those value guys. I know Garrett Temple went nuts the other day. Gary Neal's been reaching value pretty often with Beal out as well. It definitely does depend, too, on whether or not Otto Porter plays. If Porter is out, there's even some more extreme punt value with a guy like Aubrey that you can look at there. So I think there are a lot of ways to get a bunch of exposure to this game. The one way I'm not going to be getting exposure to this game is going to be DeMarcus Cousins. Even a guy like Gortat on the other side, I think is a solid option. He's still pretty cheap and been putting up good numbers. So like I said, we can get some good stacks coming out of this game. I think that's a good viable option tonight. I do think that Wall is one of the better superstars. And we talked last time about the merits of, having a superstar and maybe a star on the other team and a couple guys here, because on a big slate tournament kind of situation, there is a lot of upside in having some kind of correlation on your roster with a lot of guys who could be in a very high scoring game. The other high scoring game that I think I wouldn't mind stacking up and having some exposure to is going to be that Houston versus Charlotte Hornets game. James Harden is probably going to be my top option there, the guy that I look for. I mean, let's face it, this guy could put up 50 points on any given day. He can give you 70 without even really having a big game. I do think that we're going to see a lot of points here. Vegas is expecting a total in like the 210 range, and also think we're going to have some pretty solid, back and forth. I don't think that this game is going to get out of control on either side. So I do think Harden's someone you can look at. On the other side of the game, I think I like Batum a little bit more than I like Kemba Walker. Walker's a little expensive, and he's going to have some Beverly defense. Now, we talked about the pace that the Rockets play and how even though Beverly's a good defender, guys have still been reaching value on him, which they have been, but they haven't really been smashing through value on him. We haven't seen any 7 to 10x kind of games, even though Houston does play up tempo. But we have seen a lot of these shooting guard and small forwards kind of have their numbers tick up a little bit. So I do think that a guy like Batum, maybe even a guy like Jeremy Lin would be somebody who's, that you can use and throw in this stack on the other side along with a guy like Harden. Because of all the guys that they have banged up, I don't like any of the big substitutions for Charlotte. I'm not going after Zeller or Kaminsky or any of those guys who are seeing more minutes. But I do think it makes this a much easier spot for a guy like Dwight Howard. So Dwight Howard at only around 7,200, I think, he's a viable option that I would put in here as well. So I think that like a Harden, Batum, Howard stack, or maybe throwing something like Lin in there as well. I think that would be a Ariza, maybe even would be a solid option. Guys like this, I think putting them together in that game would be another way to start off a, pretty good studly stack and then try to find some of the glue guys and the value options in order to round it out. Last guy I want to mention, I'm not stacking this game up, but somebody who deserves mention as a stud on his own is going to be Carmelo Anthony. Melo's still a tad too cheap for me on DraftKings. He's only a little bit above the $8,000 mark, and he could easily put up 40 to 50 fantasy points, as we've basically seen him do for 7 or 8 games straight. When he's playing that power forward role, he's able to grab more rebounds, and that's what we've seen out of him. the rebounds, along with the points that we already expect out of him on a nightly basis, have given him some really big returns. So I think that Melo is another guy that you could be willing and able to pay up for, and has a good chance to reach at least 5 times value for you and not hurt you with, the upside of going for, 50 or 60 fantasy points and getting you 6, 7, 8 times value as well. Some glue guys that I want to mention. There's a lot of big men on this list. The center position is stacked with guys in that 6 to 7K price range that all make a lot of sense today. The one point guard on the list is Isaiah Thomas II. IT2 against Minnesota. Ricky Rubio defense is not something that scares me. IT2 has been an absolute stud lately. So I think if you want to come down, instead of paying 9K for Wall or almost 9K for Rondo, you can pay a little bit less than 8K for Isaiah Thomas. And I think he could wind up giving you the same 40 to 50 fantasy points that the other two can. The center spot, the guys we were talking about, you got guys like Marcin Gortat, you got guys like Al Horford, even Pau Gasol, Brook Lopez, Gorgie Dang on the other side for Minnesota. All these guys are in play. They're all viable options at the center position. Even a guy like Joakim Noah, who we'll talk about, along with Dang in the punt section. There's a lot of cheaper options at center, which is why I said, even if I am stacking up that Sacramento game, I can't get myself to pay 10 something for Cousins today when I think there's a lot more viable center value than there is value at some of the other positions. So I do think this is a 2 center day. I think you put a center in at the center spot, probably going to have another center at the utility spot, because I do think there's a lot of guys that are, just a little bit too underpriced for the position today. As for some of those punt options that we're going to talk about, like I said, you got Gorgie Dang, who's been playing big minutes now at the power forward and center spot for Minnesota. Kevin Garnett basically gets a ceremonial start and a couple minutes here and there, but it's pretty much Gorgie and, Karl Anthony Towns who are handling a lot of the big man duties over there. So I think both of those guys are in play. You get almost a $2,000 discount on Dang. And honestly, he's actually outplayed Towns in terms of minutes over the course of the last week or two. So if he's going to be getting more minutes and is $2,000 cheaper, I do think he's the guy that I'm going to be looking at a little more often. You also have, like I said, Joakim Noah, whose price has come up. When he was in the 42, 44, 4,500 range, I was using this guy every day. He gives you 25 to 32 fantasy points at 4,000 or at 6,000. At 4,000, we like it a lot better. Now that he's up to 5,500, I think he's fairly priced. I don't think he's overpriced, but I don't really think he's underpriced either. I think he's priced as a guy who's going to score 25 to 32 fantasy points at 5,400, which is exactly what he is. So is he a viable option still? Yeah, I think you can still use him, but I don't think you're getting the same upside that you were, when we were using him at 45, 4,600, where, he was giving us, scores in that exact same range. I do think he's somebody that's not on everyone's radar, though, and somebody that I think you could continue to look at. 2 other guys I'm going to mention. I do like Jeremy Lin at 5,200 as well. He's been seeing extra minutes. Even with Batum back, he's been seeing extra minutes, and he's been putting up points and rebounds, getting some assists, getting some steals and blocks. I mean, he's a guy who does fill up the stat sheet. So at 5,200, again, I think he's getting closer to fair value. I think he's still a tad underpriced, but I don't think he has huge upside at this level either. I think, that game that he had the other day was probably an outlier. You're probably looking more at like 30 points as a viable ceiling for him, which would basically just put him at value over 5K. Rodney Hood, though, at 4,500 in a paced-up game against the Phoenix Suns, is somebody who I think can beat, the value threshold. He's 4,500, so you probably need about 26, 27 points out of him. Anything above that is going to be value added to your roster. And in a paced-up game against Phoenix, who struggled to stop wing players all season, I do think you can see Rodney Hood get a 30, 35 fantasy point performance here, which would be great return on a $4,500 price tag. Obviously, you got to keep monitoring the injury situation. I'm sure between now and the time lineup's locked, there will be at least 1 or 2 injury announcements. Those will open up some, playing time for some more guys. Remember, guys like Bradley Beal getting hurt have opened up play time for guys like Garrett Temple and Gary Neal, guys who have put up some big games lately, although are not consistent. But again, these are other guys that you can consider when you're filling out your roster. And depending on how the injury news comes down later on today, you're going to get more of those, more of these guys that'll be easier to find that are, value options that you can put in there. in order to fit in a second or third stud, like in order to be able to go with Harden, Batum, Howard, or to go Wall and Rondo and Caspi and, put in another 6K player like Gortat from that same game or something like that. If you want to do those kind of things, you are going to need to find one or two of those $3,000 or $4,000 players that you think can give you a big upside. So like I said, monitor the injury situation for it. Keep an eye on some of these guys that we mentioned. It's a good starting point for your research today. Again, one of the things I like to do is target the heavily, the highest total game out there. If you look at the rosters at the end of the night that tend to be the winning rosters, they usually have a lot of exposure to the highest scoring game. So I think it's a good idea to use those Vegas totals and kind of find which games could be highest scoring and which ones are expected to stay close, and try to figure out a way to get a couple guys from those games into your roster. So thank you for joining us here for our NBA DraftKings video for Monday. This is Benny Ricciardi with rotocurve.com. Stay classy, DFS.